Okay, we're back with part 8 of the deployment mini-series. This is a real stretch for me. I have not usually counted this high. Let's get into it.
Okay, so this time we're going to talk about sacrificial units. And boy howdy, is there, like, everyone understands what a sacrificial unit is, but there's so many, like, versions of sacrificial that people just think that it feels really bad, but it's actually really efficient.
I'm gonna start.
It's totally okay.
I'm gonna start by wagering half my list as the orc player.
See, and that's things like that are. But what is half your list? Half your list in points, etc. There's so much to sacrificial units that are like totally worth it, man, all the time. But it's about understanding what is a sacrificial unit and what is it's not supposed to be sacrificial. I'm playing it wrong. And because of that, it turns into sacrificial. So there's a couple of different ones that are fairly obvious that a lot of people are used to. So screening units, infiltrate or scout, some sort of, I'm going to put them in the way to prevent my opponent from charging turn one. Catagens, there's a whole bunch of them, right? These are okay. The whole plan is when I built the list, I do not expect this unit to kill a single model. They are not meant to deal damage. That is okay. Its job that I'm paying points for is to keep this other thing alive. Or to keep it unengaged, at least. That's their job. This is a good sacrificial unit. You want these types of units to be cheap. You want these types of units to be numerous in model count. These are good things. The next one is transports. There are so many times where you are trying to figure out, how do I make this unit tougher? Do I spend CP on it to give it like Armor of Contempt? Do I put this character to give them -1 to hit? A transport, you literally buy them a transport. It changes their toughness characteristic from, let's say, 4 or 5 up to like 9 or 10, and they can totally crack the transport. That's fine. But whether I go first or they go first, the answer is they spent scary bullets, scary dice, on killing this 70-point transport. And then my 200-point unit disembarks. And there's already X number of scary dice that cannot be put into this unit because they were too busy killing this 70-point transport. Again, reasonable, good sacrificial units are a reasonable thing to put into your list. Opposite answer, if you are putting something that is already extremely tough. I've talked with this with a few people about, like, they had a unit of Blade Guard, what already has a 4-up invul, and I really feel like I need to put them in an impulsor. Okay, but you spent almost 100 points on making them tougher, but the thing that made them tougher was basically only an extra number of wounds, because while the toughness went up, it doesn't have an invul. It's way easier to bust through. Whereas having this infantry unit, not only could it be technically more protected by the fact that it's infantry, so I could hide it inside this building so it can't be shot at. Instead, there's a vehicle that like needs to get around the building, so I deploy it differently. Now it's exposed. When I disembark, I can't like disembark into the ruins. So there's times where transports are good, and there's times where if your transport's too expensive, because you don't buy a battle wagon and then put like a minimum squad of boys in there and think that that's worth it, right? Like, why would you spend so many points on that when you could just buy a truck? So it's not saying that sacrificial units are like, yeah, throw away half your list. That's not the goal here. It's about finding a very efficient way to put units in your list that your opponent wants to shoot at. They need to spend the dice on, but it's a cheap investment, and they prioritize this sacrificial unit over the thing that you're wanting to keep alive. Okay? Moving on, you got some action monkeys, right? Like, it's totally worth deep strike or strategic taking a like a min squad of storm boys, or let's say a If you're playing like Necrons, taking a little Locust Destroyer for like 35 points and uppy downing it. Even if you don't have uppy downing, you play the other detachment, you can, put it into strategic. These really cheap units that are meant to come in, do an action, score some secondary points, die. That's what I'm paying for. These can be totally worth it and 100% useful. If you are spending 35 points to earn what is effectively 3 or 4 victory points, that is like 10 points that you're spending in your list per victory point. In theory, if you could just do that, you would win almost every time you get max score, right? It's not how it works, but that's an example of why these units can be very worth it. Now, again, Action Monkey units, though, most of them tend to be sacrificial. They're not always. Giving them Lone Op means that they can, if you come in from strategic reserves and you have Lone Op, you're probably going to live because there's not very much that can shoot at you. But the minute they put something that has real amounts of shooting within that 12 inches, it totally falls over. So it's still considered a sacrificial unit, but maybe it's worth spending an extra, like, let's say 15 points to upgrade from this version, like this unit, to this other character that has Lone Op. That might be worth it, because it does give it some more survivability, and you're trying to push it away from sacrificial, but it's still probably going to be categorized as sacrificial. Fast moving units. Again, we just had a points update. The fact that jump intercessors went up in points at a min size, but not a max size, is a clear indicator that taking a min size of jump intercessors is a really efficient action unit. And they're trying to, like, okay, maybe that's too efficient. We need to, like, up them in points. But taking a max size unit, they're no longer an Action Monkey unit, right? You've invested so many points. They need to deal some damage to justify taking that many. Well, they didn't up the points there because point per damage output, they were kind of reasonably costed. There's a lot about sacrificial units that people will throw their hands up and say, like, oh yeah, half my list is sacrificial, or, every transport I take is sacrificial. It doesn't matter what guns I give it because it just dies. That's fair, but it's more reasonable to really think about how many points did I invest? How many points did my opponent invest in order to remove that sacrificial unit? And did I force their target priority onto the sacrificial unit?
Oh, yeah.
It can be very worth it. It can totally win you the game.
Well, the thing that I think about is that, like, it's a game where you win on points, right? You're not really winning on kill points or anything anymore. It's battle points and win-loss ratio, which that's a whole other thing, but kill points is not a major part of scoring anymore right now. Correct. So what you should really think about is every unit on your army kills stuff or does actions or whatever, right? All of them are supposed to be for the goal, in one way or another, of scoring points. Stopping your opponent from scoring points and getting you to score more. That's it, period. Yep. You do that, you win the game. I see it as a lot of the action monkeys, sacrificial ones, it's like, yeah, if they pop in and they die, if they scored points and then died, did they make enough to justify their inclusion in the list? That's part of why people love Storm Boys so much, and a lot of the little dinky infiltrator units that are cheap, is because, like, for 100 points or less, if you can score like 4 or 5 points on a secondary, who cares if they die? That swings games. You know what I mean?
Yep. Absolutely.
If you do that twice, that's the same amount of points as painting your entire army. That should make you feel good inside. If you're,
absolutely.
Like the and there's some funny stuff, especially because my experience with the Lone Op thing itself is just Snake Rot. And arguably, the funny part is he's a cool character and he can attach to commandos and do this and that, but I'm like, I want the cheap version with no attachment, no leading a unit, because he's tiny. Now I can sneak him in to score points, like, because he can redeploy, he can do all kinds of dumb stuff, and then ideally he charges a unit and blenderizes some infantry. a lot of times he doesn't have that good target. Oh well, if he teleports to a corner and then scores points, and like the weird boy with some boys teleports to a corner and score more points, sometimes that's enough to make up the cost of the entire boys unit in terms of points for the game. So even if they all get wiped, if we scored points, doesn't matter. Now, mind you, orcs is like a faction at large is almost entirely made up of sacrificial units, even the ones that do buku damage, and that's because we don't have good saves, period. But with maybe the exception of like mega knobs, but whatever. The don't underestimate it. Like seriously.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. I gotta go out of the way and say this. It's really easy to get emotionally attached to the thing you just finished painting and got really invested in, like making it look nice and all that stuff. And then what usually happens is the first time you put your newly, freshly painted model on the table, it dies, like instantly. Just because it's ironic or something. Don't, like, take offense to that. It's just a game. You know what I mean? Like...
Well, more importantly, like, there's an argument for... I've got this centerpiece model, and I finally finished painting my, Void Dragon or my Mortarion or whatever. Like, yeah, I understand that he's like, you're emotionally attached to him, right? Because he's like the centerpiece of your army. Well, when he dies inevitably, like, do you want to feel bad that, like, I just lost the coolest model on my list? Or do you want to, like, appreciate, like, yeah, this model... just standing there on turn one, he was so menacing that my opponent put their entire, like, 2,000 points to bear on killing this one model because they were so afraid of it. Like, just having the right mentality about your sacrificial units. And I'm not saying that, like, Mortarion is a sacrificial unit. He is not. Don't do that. But, like, whether it's you're emotionally attached to your centerpiece model, or whether you purchase these sacrificial units like a transport, a truck or something like that, them dying shouldn't feel bad.
Yeah.
When they die, this was the plan. You killed my truck. Ha ha, nerd. Look at all of the knobs that I dumped out that are untouched. What are you going to do about them? Like, just have the right mentality, and sacrificial units become benefits, not...
At the end of the day, try not to get the nerd rage-itis, because we all get it sometimes. I totally get it. But it's like, it's a game like chess. The whole thing, you're going to make trades.
Yep. Everything
is tradable if it's on the board, period. So, like, if you're playing in the market and you make trades, that's the game, man. Like, I understand that people get grouchy. I understand that sometimes, like, your faction's overcosted, you're playing against a faction that's undercosted, whatever. It's 40k can be a long game to play, whatever. I don't want to, like, go too far into this, but basically it's like, it's going to take several games, which may be like a couple weeks of playing like once or twice a week, before you realize that, like, through repetition that, like, oh, this one unit dies like half the time. If you've only played 2 games, it feels like all the time. If you've played like 10 games, well, now you know it's every now and then. You know what I mean? Like, it's less... your sample size sort of matters. Don't take a small sample size and make it the reason for your emotional response and how you choose to write your list and play the game, because it's a game that evolves over time. Your list will evolve, the way you use the same units will evolve. It sort of makes sense that the first time you put a unit on the table, you're going to suck with it because you've never used it before.
Mm-hmm.
The 10th time you play the Shard of the Void Dragon, you're going to know exactly what he's for, exactly what matchups you probably want. Like, it'll be fine. Anyway, I digress. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video. Go ahead and crump the like button, subscribe if you want to watch more of our stuff. We run a tiny little friendly local game store with an online store too, called Go for Games. You know, where you go for games. Anyway, support us and have fun. Thanks so much.